Alrighty, hello, everybody. We are back. Say hello, Nightbringer.
Happy Thursday. Good to be
Yep.
back.
It probably
Blame
is.
cake on us being late.
It probably is a Thursday. Yes, we are back after a few weeks off. Not my fault in any way.
Definitely not my fault.
In any way, but it's fine. We won't dwell on that. We definitely won't dwell on the fact that Nightbringer made me watch the same episode 4 times.
Hey, I watched it 4 times too in a very short period of time to try and make up for being a bastard.
That doesn't make up for it. That's just you. This episode. I don't know if I dislike this episode so much because I had to watch it so many times, or if I just do generally dislike this episode. Like I honestly don't know. There's a lot of things I definitely do not like about this episode. So this is episode 6. This is called Lovers and Other Killers, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
And I don't know where to really start on this one. There seem to be a lot of fairly famous guest stars in this one.
Yeah.
At least for the time, which, coming back to your point that apparently this was the first episode ever filmed, might be the reason why. Maybe they were trying to kick this off as a second pilot. If that's true, the first pilot was better.
Oh, absolutely. The first pilot was so much better.
And they made the right decision. And honestly, part of me is glad that you said that, because I was worried this was going to be the formula going forward. And the formula they've hit on this time is very much the modern procedural formula of you stumble from clue to clue until there's an answer that makes sense. And I don't like that approach.
I didn't even feel like it was that.
It really was, because you couldn't really work this one out until the very end. Now, again, I guessed who the murderer was, but that wasn't because of anything the story had told me. It was purely based on how they treated the character. Yeah, the filming and that character in particular. I'd kind of worked it out. And I'd also... It's okay. So it started at the beginning. It opens actually with a murder of of an older woman. Mm-hmm. I honestly didn't know at the start if that was meant to be drunk acting or if she was just tired. But it is later revealed that she is an alcoholic.
There is just enough to tell you that it is alcohol versus being tired, but it's not good. It's very weak.
It's not good. And then she's basically murdered as part of a burglary that's gone wrong. Or at least that's what you believe. I will say,
seems so bad.
It does seem so bad, because not only was the guy doing the burglary, and I'm pretty sure he could have just got away if he wanted to. Like,
yeah,
the murder of that old woman seemed like he wanted to murder that old woman.
Yes.
Right, which makes sense for us as the audience, because we're sold that this murder is very important and part of the plot. But in reality, I think the way that is shown is false.
Correct.
But anyway, we'll get to that. I guess we'll get to that twist as we get there. So then Jessica Fletcher is off on her travels yet again.
No, I'm not ready for that. We go back. She's... So... If you pay enough attention, you can tell she's drunk. Honestly, I didn't fully catch it the first time through, but she's drunk.
Yep.
Drunk or tired. The way she moves through her residence, which has obviously been broken into, obviously been rifled through, she leans underneath a desk to grab a music box that's broken for a unit, for a residence, that has all the evidence of just being broken into. Like, they're not even fully done, because things are still there. And she calls, I guess the call, but why did they also mute the audio for the call? I don't care how blackout drunk you are. When you recognize your whole unit has been broken into, and you would, given everything they show, you're going to have more of a reaction than whatever shit show she did. And her acting on that, her acting when she's being choked is just weird.
But that's the thing, that the whole thing is weird because,
yes,
like I said, we're meant to believe that we're showing the events as it happened, right? But when it's explained what actually happened, it doesn't actually make any sense that what we're showing is what happened. Right?
They do show it as if it's a crime of passion of him choking her out.
Yes.
Or
the robbery was almost a cover, right? And the murder was the point, is how it's shown to us. But how it's later explained to us is that no, that's not true at all.
Which annoys me greatly.
Right. And yeah, so that annoys me. And it's one of the things I don't like a lot about mystery programs in general is when they show you something as fact, but then later on reveal, actually, no, it wasn't. We fed you lies so you couldn't possibly know what was going on.
I don't feel like you can have a camera be a dishonest narrator. I know that's a technique, is to have the narrator not be honest, but
that's fine. If it's the narrator lying to you, yeah, that is absolutely fine. And even if that was the camera, and we're showing, what we're showing with the camera is we believe we've seen the murder happen.
Exactly.
Right? We've seen the fact of it, and the fact of it is that if what is later explained to have happened is what actually happened, the way the murder went down makes no sense.
Correct.
Right? And that annoyed me at first. Well, I mean, it still annoys me now. And it annoyed me even worse. But like the thing that annoyed me most about that was just how badly acted and conceived and shot it was in the beginning.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do believe then she's on her travels. Seattle Airport, I think. And they do this very weird joke where she's told the guy from Airplane Mission Impossible that she's bringing
his name is Edmund.
Was he Edmund?
Edmund.
And she rides up the escalator holding a baby for some reason. I think it was an attempt at humor.
I think it was an attempt first at humor and second at trying to establish her as well-learned, well-researched, kind, compassionate, because it also immediately establishes that she speaks Chinese, except it also takes God knows how long for the two Chinese to show up with her. Like, she's the last one off the plane, which, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think as the audience, you automatically know that the person that she was supposed to be coming with is not the baby.
Yes. I can't even remember who she was meant to be coming with, honestly.
Her editor.
Oh, okay. Was it the editor?
Mm-hmm.
At least the reason for her being there made a lot more sense to me. She's an established. Well, she may not be a very well established author at this stage. But
enough so that he's calling her famous.
If we take the timeline as this is episode 6, she is a very established author at this stage. And she's there to give a not a
university lecture.
There we go. About her books and about how you do this kind of murder mystery type stuff. And that makes a lot of sense. And she's doing it for an old college friend, which also makes a lot of sense. We also there's again another slight hint that back in the day there may have been some kind of interest between the two, but then obviously her husband was also at that college.
Why is there always some old guy that wants to bone her?
Because it's very important.
No, it's not.
No, and it wasn't important to the story at all. But yes, I think the implication was that her husband was also at the college.
Yes.
I don't know if it's the college that they were teaching at or what. But obviously they all went to the same college at some point.
And they refer to a Greek society as also being part of that whole setup.
Yes. And she chose her husband over this guy. So there must have been some interest from that guy at some point. And a little bit of backstory. Okay, I'm with it. A little bit of backstory. Fine. I'm still along for the ride at this stage. At this
point, I'm already bitter about it being another old fuck boy.
Well, yeah, but then that just gets even worse, really, in this one.
It does.
But so then, I honestly don't remember where it goes next.
So almost immediately from there,
Yeah.
they go to the university,
Yeah.
and we have our first interaction with.
So this is the bit outside the doctor's office?
Yes, but I think he's the dean, or he's at least high up in management of the university, and we get to meet his secretary for the first time.
Yes, that's right. And this is where they give us a first big clue, although you may not know it's a clue at the time, in that she's going through his expenses and chastising him for buying stupid things.
It's also, I have so many comments on her.
Right. So that's kind of my main comment is that she reminded me of Lady Penelope from Thunderbirds. But that is completely beside the point.
It would be useful if I knew that reference, but I don't.
And in the entire final speech, spoilers, where she's confessing, I pictured her as Lady Penelope every time I watched it. I could not stop myself.
Next, you're going to tell me every time you watch this, you'll remember the scene she made about health.
Oh, dear. Sometimes. But
I think I have to go watch that just to give context.
There are definitely times in this one where it definitely reminded me of that. But anyway, so we're given the first big clue that she's got access to his financial data.
And you're almost given the impression that Amelia, the secretary, doesn't quite run his life, but he's intimately aware of basically every step of it. She's that involved in what's going on.
100%. And you're also, straight off the bat, I think, given the impression that she's desperately in love with this guy.
Oh, fuck yes.
Right? I don't think that is being hidden. And, in love in a way that is dangerous.
It's not flirting. It's almost obsessive.
Yes. And maybe in the 80s that would have been considered fine, but like watching it now, to me that's alarm bells ringing straight away. Right? That's bunny boiler material.
That's what?
Bunny boiler material.
Okay, I have no idea what that is.
Oh my god, you need to well, I would say get out more, but that's the opposite of what you need to do. You need to watch more films. Stay in and watch more films. But there's also no reason really to pay any attention to that. Right?
To the scene of Edmund and Amelia
Yeah. This all just seems like world building to introduce. So she's there to give the lecture. Does she give the lecture first?
No, actually, the first thing to happen is so she mentions J.B. Fletcher, Jessica, mentions that she needs a secretary of sorts, and Amelia obviously offers. And it gets posted, and this is she goes home, and this is where we meet David. This
is where we meet David, who, to me, was the highlight of the episode. Because he made my skin crawl from the first moment he appeared on screen.
He manages so. David was the most interesting person on screen.
Yes.
I found the way he introduces himself as the go-getter, as trying to get out there, get ahead, realizing the environment he is, because he's a man trying to be a secretary in the 80s, which at some point secretaries actually used to be exclusively men, and every time women start doing a job, men run away from it. But
yes. And then he plays the gender card. There's a lot of humor in the introduction.
But there's also the point that he just barges as soon as she opens the door. He barges past her. He takes the whole room.
Yeah.
And his proof of skills is to some extent charming, but it's also just I understand you're trying to be a go-getter, trying to take control of the scene. That way she'll actually listen to you, but there's social norm. Like, you don't barge into someone's residence, whether it be an apartment or a hotel room or their house.
Yes, I agree. And just the whole thing, I think they were trying to play it light. I think it was meant to be funny and a little bit flirtatious.
Right, I got that.
Right, but it did not come across to me like that, and it may purely be because, like I said, from the moment the door is open, just the look and the way the guy was acting made my skin crawl. So everything that he ever did made me not like him, which was the point of his character. So kudos to the actor, because he achieved, for me at least, exactly what he was meant to.
He does come off immediately as a manipulator and
yes.
duplicitous.
Yes. And just kind of everything that I don't like in people. So I'm straight away, I don't like him. So then it must be the lecture. Right, the first lecture where she just does the fake gun with the bang that comes out.
Yes, that is the next scene.
Because that, that again, that proves why she's there. It has nothing to do with the story whatsoever. But we are at the end. The professor, the other professor, comes up and says that was a good lecture. Talks about his wife, and is then waved at by a very young-looking woman,
and they make her conspicuous.
Yes, and Jessica picks up on it and asks the other guy, the Mission Impossible airplane guy, do you think that's his wife? And then he acts like he didn't see, which I think is fair enough. I do wonder with how it went on if we're meant to pick up more from that he didn't see, in that actually he did, but he didn't want to admit that he did. But it came across as he just didn't see, and I would completely believe he would not have seen that brief interaction between those two.
To me, it still screams. I obviously don't know quite the social norms at the time, but at least today, the interaction between a professor and a student that blatant is profoundly unprofessional, and I would think would break codes of ethics. And I would wager, I feel like Edmund is like the dean of students or something. He's rather high up in the.
Yeah, I don't know
he's
what
he's
a professor meant to be, but yes, he was high up. Yeah.
And I feel like he would, for the university to not be sued, he would see that.
He was the dean. He was the dean. Yes, but again, bear in mind, at least in the UK, it's very recent. Like within the last decade or so, that any kind of restrictions on university / college professors and students has been brought into place.
Okay, and that just might be me feeling out of time.
Yes. So in the 80s, it probably was more normal.
I think it was still a faux pas, but it wasn't.
Oh, of course,
it was looked down on, but it wasn't.
Because there's a reason why, as time goes on, these kind of rules and things come in place, right? But this is way before the idea of like grooming or manipulation through power. Like none of these things would have been seen as bad in the 80s. Just ask Harvey Weinstein. Right.
I have a feeling enough people knew of it, but it wasn't enough to make it a social policy. It wasn't enough to actually.
Yes. And again, I don't think it would be illegal because it is two adults. When you're at that stage, at that age, it is two consenting adults, even if there is a unevenness of power between the two.
Right.
But this is why I questioned, were we meant to take more from that scene than I did, which is he just didn't see it, because I could well believe it was a very small indication. Obviously, the camera draws our attention to it, so we see it. But if the camera hadn't moved, would I have noticed the girl in the door waving at the professor? I don't know.
So, to comment on that, the way we're to assume, obviously, what we're shown there, but the familiarity of it, the norm of it, to me also establishes this is not the first time that she's been essentially waiting for Professor Lowry to come from a social obligation to spend time with her. It's set up that this is not atypical. So even though Edmund, the dean, doesn't notice at that time, part of my argument on it being unethical and a problem is they do it so blatantly, so forwardly, like it is routine, that yes, while Edmund may not have noticed that time, everyone else noticed, and everyone else would be noticing this.
Yes. So that was... But then you say everyone else was noticing. I don't know how true that is, given how the rest of the story unfolds. But we'll get there. So then we must be back.
Now I think we're at dinner with David.
Yeah, so because he says that the dean, he was the dean, says he can't make dinner. She goes back to the hotel.
Yes.
He is no, he's meant to be in this time, right? Because he's just done the writing and he's reading a book while laying down on the sofa. Yeah. So he then says, why don't we go somewhere fancy for dinner? There's a little joke about who's going to pay. You know, I'm a poor student, I can't afford it, but you're a rich author, so you can. They go to this posh restaurant, and they definitely try to up the sexual tension.
I have written in my notes, look, we get you wanting to have fun with grandma, but you're just being creepy.
Right. They definitely up the what is this guy after? Because it's not just a secretarial position. And they have a nice lunch. There's dinner. Sorry, there's a weird thing where Jessica Fletcher's convinced everybody is looking at her. Maybe because she's got a toy boy. No, she says it first. She says it first, and he comes back that they're looking at me.
Okay.
As in him.
I'm jealous of him. Okay.
Yes. Which is all a little bit odd, but again, I think you're just trying to get this. And again, tension. I think they're also trying to maybe show the double standards of the time, which is we have just seen an older professor clearly about to go and visit a very young female student. And then we have a old woman and a young guy, and it does seem creepy. Right?
You know, the problem for it being creepy actually has very little to do, in my mind, with Jessica and everything to do with him and his
100%
behavior.
Agree. 100%
you have a fair
agree.
Point.
But I do think, were they trying to show the double standards at the time, and really still now?
Right.
You know, it does happen more often. It is more acceptable, but you know, older women going out with younger boys was considered very odd. Whereas Leonardo DiCaprio never going out with anyone over 20 is perfectly acceptable. But
I think there was a comment about Leonardo DiCaprio had to switch to using Bing because now Google was over 25 years old. Because it's not 20, it's 25.
It's 25, okay. But yes, so you kind of have the dinner, and then somehow the police know that they're at this place having dinner, which didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, but it's also kind of tacky the way he's going through his money that David is to pay, I assume, the valet to bring the car around. I think it was
the valet to bring... Well, I couldn't work it out because there seemed to be so many things wrong with this, right? I couldn't decide if they'd already left the dinner and driven back to the hotel, right?
Oh,
because Jessica Fletcher makes the weird comment about, that's a nice car you have, right? Which you would imagine she would already know because they would have driven to the restaurant.
Yeah.
And it seemed odd to comment on it when you were going back.
Yeah, and especially in front of the valet.
Especially in front of the valet, and it seemed a little bit odd. And then the policeman apparently knew they were at this restaurant, which doesn't make any sense. Knowing that he's at the hotel because she's working for Jessica Fletcher, very easy to work out, right? But the only two people who knew they were out for dinner were the two people out for dinner. So how would the policeman have worked that out?
Yeah, because at best they would have from the dean that she's not out to dinner with him.
Yes.
Which would indicate back towards the hotel.
Yes.
Well, okay, so this is where it furthers into the argument of this whole episode, this whole first half is, why are we actually so suspect of David? Because to me, that the police finding him there leans into the whole story they're trying to create at the beginning of David being the suspect. But what actually even begins to tie him to the scene? There's just nothing.
No, but yes, there is just nothing. So again, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then you have to imagine they're not at the hotel. They are at the restaurant because Jessica Fletcher ends up at the police station with him.
Right.
And you would imagine if they were at the hotel, she would have just gone up to bed. Right?
I argue that they were at the restaurant, but I think at this point, we're also given just enough to think that Jessica's at least slightly enamored with how charming he's attempting to be. And she automatically, when the police come, assumes that he isn't guilty of murder.
Yes. But that's just her de facto response, it seems.
At this point, I think the audience is almost supposed to accept that Jessica is actually infallible on who she thinks isn't a murderer. Like,
yes.
That she's almost Pope level on knowing who is, or at least who isn't a murderer, which doesn't make
a lot of sense. No, I agree. And it would have been an interesting twist for her to have been proven wrong. Because yes, she was actually maybe slightly enamored by David. So therefore didn't want to believe he was a murderer. But that's not what happened, because they don't do anything that might be remotely interesting.
No.
So they do the police station. He tries to brush off 2 hours of police questioning is perfectly normal and standard. Clearly doesn't want to tell Jessica Fletcher what's going on.
And getting them tailed by a car.
Which is fair enough. And then Jessica notices that there's a police car that tails him. So she's obviously then intrigued. So we're then cut back to the next morning. She's at the police station. She's sent across the road to go and find the detective. They have a weird thing where he doesn't quite remember her name. I think that's meant to be funny again. And she's then questioning, David has said it was nothing. And the detective was like, oh, that's what he said, is it? And then I would imagine breaks all kind of police procedures and rules by telling Jessica Fletcher basically everything. And this is where the link to them, and at the moment, this is the only murder we know about, is the murder at the beginning.
It's the only one that's actually happened thus far.
It's the only one that's happened, right? So this is what ties him back to the old lady, is that he's, or at least in the policeman's mind, he has been doing some kind of fraud on this old lady, spending time with her and stealing as much money of hers as he possibly can. And therefore the robbery/murder would seem very much up his alley. Right? That's pretty much all they've got from the police at that stage, is that he looks like a very likely suspect because of what he's done already.
It's still so weak.
Oh, incredibly weak. And it wouldn't have led to him threatening to arrest him in the restaurant.
Right.
Right, because he didn't want to go in. But
it would be questioning, but they don't have enough to warrant or arrest him.
Yes, yes.
Well, yeah, but flip side.
But in the 80s, maybe.
American cops love to lie. And lying...
That is true. That is true.
It is okay to tell someone, you either come with me or I arrest you, even if you legally don't have a reason to arrest them.
Yeah, but you open yourself up to a lawsuit. Which is, I mean, if you didn't actually go through with the arrest, there would have been no lawsuit. But if you had arrested David then, and the case worked out the way that it did, he would have been able to get money from there.
There's no consequences in the U.S. for a police officer doing something wrong. Even if there's a lawsuit, it actually comes out of the budget of whoever the cop works for. So if it's a state patrol, it comes out of the state's budget. If it's city, it comes out of the city. So there's literally no consequence, and it doesn't make a difference if he had actually arrested him.
There will be consequence, because the budget for that police department will then go down based on how yes, it will. 100%.
Then they bitch that they don't have enough budget and the budget needs to be increased.
100%. But it still doesn't make sense. It doesn't really make sense. It makes sense why they bring him in for questioning. I 100% understand why they would bring him in. I get that. Why they're then convinced he is the murderer, I don't really understand. Because he just, the detective guy just seems laser focused. It's definitely him, and I just need to prove it.
Yeah, he does come off. The police obviously have him as the prime suspect, and that feels.
I think the only suspect.
Yeah.
Right? They're not even looking for anyone else. And spoilers, as far as I can work out, when it's proven that he isn't the murderer, it seems to be by pure luck.
Yes.
That they catch the burglar, who then admits that, oh yes, I also murdered her. Right? Because I don't think they were looking at that guy for this. I think they just picked him up somewhere. I can't quite remember how they explain it.
So she had, obviously she's a well-to-do older lady. She had very valuable antiques and such. They happened to run across, or in some form or fashion, those antiques are seen in a racket/pawn shop. And then
Okay.
that.
Yeah. So that's how they track the guy down in the end. But that's not until much later, because at the moment, again, the murder we think we're trying to solve is the murder of this old lady. And the only person who's got any connection to that old lady in our orbit so far is David. Right? So therefore, it can't be anyone else but David. Because we haven't been introduced to anyone else who even knows this old lady that we're aware of.
Right? I could not do a suspension of disbelief on the fact that, yes, the audience has only been shown David, but none of this adds up for David. Yes, David's manipulative. Yes, David's honestly probably a bad person, but we have nothing to say that this is.
And this is why I really dislike this episode when we get to the end. But so we've done the police thing. This is when she goes back to her hotel room and David has let himself in.
Yes, I actually, one last thing on the police. Did you notice when the investigator, whatever, is driving away after telling Jessica, don't trust David.
Don't trust David.
Jessica weirdly leans against, like she's trying to peer into the car in just a weird stance as he pulls away. Did you see, like, what was that scene supposed to be communicating?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
We both watched that 4 times, and why?
It was weird, but in an episode that was full of kind of weird cuts and actions, it kind of just got washed away with the flood.
To me, it was supposed to. It was so peculiar, so odd, so deliberate, so held.
I think it was, and I think the only thing that makes sense to me is that she's putting together in her mind. And again, we start to get to what I can only describe as the schizophrenia of Jessica Fletcher in these next 2 scenes. And these are just 2 scenes back to back. And it annoys me how quickly this changes. So David lets himself into a hotel room, right? Yeah. Jessica sees that someone has rifled through her briefcase. And rightly so. She's still a little bit rattled by what the policeman has said. It's all going through her mind that maybe David is a murderer, does try to get close to older women, steal as much money and whatever from them as they can, and then whenever it runs dry, just bumps them off. So she's got all that going on. She's a little bit worried about David, a little bit scared of David. And then he just appears in a hotel room because he's clearly sweet-talked one of the people who clean hotel rooms into letting him in. Housekeeper. Right. And again, the whole thing is creepy. Right?
Oh, yeah. The concept of letting yourself in. So, we're obviously going to trail further into the episode, but he lets himself in by sweet-talking / asking one of the housekeepers, and then he promises he won't do it again. And then later in the episode, he does it again and he claims he forgot. I'm sorry. Yes. How in fuck's name? It's not like you have an extra key and you forgot you're not supposed to be there. It's not like you're in the building for any other reason than to go see her. He had to ask housekeeping again to let him in, which means he'd have to be either there when they were cleaning her room or specifically. That's not an accident. That's not a forget. That's a what the fuck is wrong with you, dude?
No, but I also think that particular one is put in there as a kind of, again, trying to force the audience down a road that I think we've already given up on, the fact that David is guilty. And I think the fact that he does it again is meant to kind of make you think, okay, maybe he is. And right at the end, we'll get to another little bit at the end, because there was a good bit at the end where hopefully they turn into something. But anyway, so she, and basically he's like, well, should we get back to work? And Jessica Fletcher's like, no, please get out of my hotel room. I'm a little bit freaked out. This is all subtext.
And also, he messed with her briefcase or something.
Yes, or somebody messed with her briefcase. He said he didn't do it, but it's never solved whether it was him or not. Probably was.
It was him.
And then he's asking about, well, should I come back tomorrow? And Jessica's like, well, no, we'll play it by ear. It's fine. Don't want to, she just wants him out of the hotel room because clearly and rightly, given everything that has happened, she is wary of David, right? As she is reacting to David, I don't find there's anything wrong with how she's reacting to that situation.
No.
Right?
What?
At all.
And the phrase that threw me is David says he has a right to tell Jessica.
A right to tell her, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. A right to get the fuck out. You don't have a right to anything. I met you 2 days ago.
Yes. Yes.
You owe me nothing and I owe you nothing. Fuck off.
Yes. The quickness of how quick he attaches to her is insane.
Yeah.
But we then go, so she's walking with the dean, cut to walking with the dean, and they're talking about David being a murderer, and she's already defending him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what the fuck?
This is why I have to assume that she has some infallible character recognition on murderer versus not. That she's pegged him now as weird, but somehow, again, like the fucking Pope, she knows who's guilty. She knows. She's Santa. She knows if you've been a murderer.
But does it also come across as, like...
stupid.
I just wasn't sure what they were trying to go for here, right? Which is, does she act sensible when she's by herself, but wants to have this holier than thou attitude when she's around other people? Like, it didn't make any sense to me. The whole she's, defending David, I kind of get because she loves to work out puzzles. She does like to think she's a good judge of people. Possibly there's a little bit of attraction going on, although I never really got that there was any real attraction from Jessica to David.
I think she's flattered, but not attracted.
Flattered, but not attracted, yeah. And I could kind of get that she would want to argue that, if he was a murderer, I wouldn't have let him become my secretary. Seems to essentially be the attitude that she's giving off to the dean. Even though we've just seen that she was really freaked out by this guy.
She's an infallible judge of character. He's weird. He will break in, but he would never murder. Her judge of murderer versus not.
Yes, and then we get to so they arrive at the dean's office, and David is waiting to talk to the dean for some reason I don't understand.
That's a good point.
Wanting to talk to Jessica, maybe. Wanting to talk to the dean. I mean, he is the dean. Maybe because he's suspected of murder, they said they're going to throw him off the campus or the college, or maybe there's some kind of story that they just didn't bother to tell us.
Yeah, but they could have told that story in all of 30 seconds.
They did, but yeah, given what we knew, there was no reason for him to be going straight to the dean.
And
now, he is a manipulator. Yes, he is a manipulator, so maybe he was trying to get ahead of what he thought was coming. And again, at this stage, he is the only one who can be guilty, right?
Yes.
Nobody else we
know.
Because we got nothing else. So he is the only one who can be the murderer, right? So is he just trying to get ahead of what is coming, right? Maybe that's why he's there. But it doesn't make a lot of sense that he's there to talk to the dean. But then straight away, Jessica was like, oh, yes, I'm going to be doing lots of work. You come back tomorrow. You'll have plenty of writing to do. I trust you now, David.
Yeah.
For some reason, like, it makes no sense that she has changed her attitude that quickly. Like, no new evidence has come to light.
I think the theme of this whole episode could be, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And that's where I thought, like, that was just seemed really schizophrenic of Jessica Fletcher. Like, there's two different personalities. And it made zero sense to me that would happen. And then I think this is when she starts to say, but, well, if he was the murderer, would he not have given himself an alibi?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if you're meant to think David overheard that or not. I don't really know. I don't think so, because I think he's left by then.
Yeah, he's left by then. Or at least...
I think I'm trying to read cleverness into this series, which isn't necessarily there.
If David had overheard it, they would have shown it.
But this is what makes sense, though.
They've done so much
this is what it's the only thing that makes sense as to why he does what he does next, right? I mean, I guess the dean has already said you need. Was it the dean who says to him you need an alibi?
I think he's just obsessed with Jessica Fletcher and getting her approval. And
is he told to need an alibi? Because for some reason he decides to get himself an alibi. Right?
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, out of nowhere, he decides to get himself an alibi. So we cut to I think we cut straight to the scene where it's the girl in the diner.
Lila. So I want to dial back on that scene.
Yes.
We establish before this point that David thinks of himself as above the airheaded floozies of his own age.
Yes.
Why would he be friends with Lila? Why would he have reached out to her? I
don't think there's any reason to say that he wouldn't be friendly with people / women of his own age.
He also mentions in that first scene that they're together the books he reads, and he's essentially above the level of her talks because her talks are designed for students, and he's above the students.
But again, that might just be him trying to...
He's a pretentious bastard.
Pretentious bastard, but also maybe a manipulator. So, again, I don't know if I'm trying to read cleverness into where it doesn't exist. It kind of made sense to me. Okay, so he says to Jessica Fletcher he doesn't like young women as a kind of way of saying, I like older women, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. It would also make perfect sense to me if he is a manipulator that he would say to a younger girl he loves the attention of people his own age. Right? Because if he's a manipulator, he's going to just say whatever he needs to get whatever he needs from this person. Right? So it's possible that he manipulates both ways. It's possible that he just manipulates Jessica Fletcher and could very well be friends with someone who I'm assuming he's meant to be at college with.
Mm-hmm.
It's never. It may be stated that they share some classes. I honestly don't know. But we cut to her doing this really weird phone call to Jessica Lansbury. Jessica Fletcher, right? Yeah, this is the phone call, right?
Yes, I was complaining about Fletcher versus...
Yeah, sorry, yeah. So she does this really weird phone call where she's like, David's got an alibi, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. Mm-hmm. Come meet me in an abandoned warehouse at 10 o'clock this evening. Right?
Yeah.
Jessica Fletcher, quite rightly on the phone, is like, I'm not going to meet you anywhere. What the fuck are you talking about? Right? Perfectly acceptable, understandable. I've only known David for a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be leaving, one would assume, in a couple of days because she's only doing the one lecture tour, whatever. I mean, I thought it was meant to be one lecture, but then she gives at least one more as a way of pointing somebody else as kind of the guilty party. But so next scene, she's in a taxi in the warehouse at 10 o'clock in the evening, right? Again, the schizophrenia of Jessica Fletcher is insane in this one.
I feel like that one is given enough. That's a trope of I'm not going to do this thing to meet this person privately, and then they do the thing. To me, that's enough of a trope that I'm willing to write that one off.
Okay, but we then, as Jessica Fletcher is entering, we see a car driving away.
And she's only made it up roughly the first flight of stairs.
Yes.
She's got to climb this whole flight of stairs. Yes. And that car's at least 30 plus meters from the actual entrance to the warehouse. It's far away, and it pulls away as we see her going up.
And as far as I'm concerned, Jessica Fletcher must have seen that car.
Yes.
Right, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Nope.
But she must have seen that car, or there's no way she could have made the leaps and bounds and deductions that she does later on. So she then goes in. There's this very tense scene. We, as the audience, are clearly meant to believe that Jessica Fletcher is about to be attacked. Right? For some reason that doesn't make a lot of sense. Other than to prove possibly David is guilty. At this stage, I don't see how getting rid of Jessica Fletcher would have helped anybody. Right? That's beside the point. I think we're meant to believe that she's about to be attacked and she's in danger. But then she takes her time going around the warehouse, and then suddenly Layla comes out of the shadows, and I think she's been shot or stabbed or something.
What I thought that scene is Lila, who, again, we didn't even mention, but Lila's husband is incredibly possessive. We skipped past
that. The husband in the very, I mean, I'm hoping even in the 80s that scene would have felt very old fashioned. This whole husband, who they're clearly going through divorce proceedings, but this husband grabbing his wife by the arm. You know, it's in a public place. No one says anything about it. It felt very odd. And again, they're just trying to set up this guy as possessive, but for a reason that makes no sense to us. Because again, we still believe we're solving the murder of the old woman.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So him being possessive of her doesn't make a lot of sense. Unless they were trying... No, it doesn't make any sense. It only makes sense based on what happens next.
There is some theoretical... It could give credence. So that whole scene with her husband gives credence to her being unwilling to give out her name and wanting to be quote-unquote more private. But we've also already seen this woman with the professor, Professor Lowry.
I disagree. Like, there is no reason why her with Jessica Fletcher in that same diner wouldn't have made just as much sense as going to the warehouse. Right?
I think his scene is to justify her being secretive, but it's shit.
When it's to do with men.
Right.
She's having dinner with Jessica Fletcher, and that's also going to make him jealous? I don't believe so.
I think it would, just because he's that possessive, but it still doesn't give nearly enough. Because then we see her immediately go down and sit with another guy.
Which would
be more suspect than Jessica.
We also know that she's going to be at school the next day, right? So why didn't she just go and meet her there? Right? Going to the warehouse makes no sense unless Jessica Fletcher is being set up. Right? It's the only reason to do it. But she's not being set up.
Lila's getting killed.
Yes. And again, the whole way that happened seemed very odd to me. So she's already been hit and murdered while Jessica Fletcher is going up. Well, before Jessica Fletcher gets to the warehouse.
Exactly. Right? We see the car drive away.
We see the car drive away. So they've already run from the warehouse to the car, started the car, and driven away.
And the injury that Lila dies from is an injury to the spine.
Yes.
I thought it was a knife to the spine, but it doesn't really matter. It was an injury to the spine. You see clearly enough. Why didn't they have her poisoned and foaming out the mouth? Why didn't they have it be a gut injury that she's bleeding out from? Any of those could have worked. They actually chose the worst possible murder method to line up with the timeline there. It's stupid.
Because yes, okay, you wonder about the car. Why is that car pulling away? What's happened? But then, given the wound and how she lurches forward, you're kind of like, well, surely she's been murdered while Jessica Fletcher is in the building.
Yeah, within the past 30 seconds.
Within the past 30 seconds. But then we realized, no, that's not what happened. She took this injury about
20 minutes ago.
Maybe. You know, we don't know.
Maybe there's a lot of flights of stairs for both Jessica and the murderer.
Maybe she's been knocked unconscious and wakes up to Jessica Fletcher's voice and somehow stumbles forwards. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But now suddenly we have 2 murders on the books. And at this stage, we're meant to try and link the 2 murders together. Right? The detective clearly does, because he responds to what I can only imagine is Jessica Fletcher putting in a 911 call somehow. Maybe the taxi driver stayed at the back. I don't know. But he turns up, and the first thing he asks his detectives is, get the squad who've been trailing David to tell me where he'd been.
And again, we're given no good reason why. Like, obviously David is the suspect, but we're still not given any credence as to why he is being so closely hounded by the police. At some point, I'm thinking he badmouthed one of the police officers and they're just trying to get revenge. At this point, what the fuck?
Right. But I think in terms of the plot, the only reason he is being handled by the police is to then give him an ironclad alibi. Right?
Fair.
Because it's the police who prove he has not left his house, I think, for that evening. So he definitely did not murder Lila.
If we've already got the magic for Layla to not actually fall down until well after the murderers left, he could have done it yesterday. He could have done it before the phone call.
Yes, but this isn't fantasy Murder, She Wrote, which would be amazing. But
we're pretty fucking close,
So, but yeah, we are now at this stage, because I don't think he's in that scene where he admits that. No, because he still thinks David is the murderer, so he must still believe the old lady and Lila, are now connected.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we're starting to ask ourselves.
The police officer, and that David says that he told Layla not to reach out to Jessica.
Yes.
Because of the possessive husband.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense. Again, we're then obviously meant to think that, okay, the possessive husband is now a suspect in her murder.
Why?
And he's a very good suspect in her murder. But what's that got to do with anything else?
Something I just realized.
Yes.
David's fucking heartless.
Yes.
He set Lila up to give Jessica the alibi, and he could not give a flying fuck that she just died.
No, he's a psychopath.
He asked her to be there.
He's a psychopath. And this is one of the interesting... I'll save it till the end, but it's one of the interesting things they did at the end with his character, and I really hope they follow up on it at some point, but I doubt they will. So
I have notes on that.
So I can't honestly remember what the next scene is. Because at some point she's back at the office and says she's not a love culprit for the dean. Have we already had that bit?
I don't think so. I think is our next scene actually with Jessica Fletcher meeting with the husband and the whole peculiarness that was?
Oh, that would make sense. So she goes to the swimming pool to meet the husband.
Weirdly crouching next to it. Yeah. Knowing where he's going to pop up.
No, knowing where he is, where he's going to pop up. And he pops up. He seems, again, schizophrenic a little bit. We're shown that, in the first scene at the restaurant, he's possessive. He loves this girl, this woman, to a, obsessive degree in a way. But now that she's dead, he doesn't give a shit.
Well, and even with a commercial break, a long commercial break, we're still within the past 10 minutes of that phone call happening, and him literally holding on to her and refusing to let go.
Yeah.
And he's just checked out. He's like, nah, I don't give a shit.
No, I don't give a shit. She's dead now.
His only care is that that Jessica not turn his wife's death into another of the books.
Into a book, yeah.
Yeah, he couldn't give a shit. And also, what the fuck was with that treadmill? He walks weirdly. It looks weird. Am I just out of time? Because yes, the treadmill looks weird, but his entire way on walking on it feels... I've never seen someone walk stupidly.
But no. So, and then he ends that by saying, "Aren't you late for class?"
Yeah.
Which I don't know how he knows she's late. I mean, I guess it would have been advertised, but I don't know why he would have cared.
It's a plot device, but it's annoying.
Yeah, he apparently knows the schedule. She then runs off, and we are then doing the questioning of, because again, we've almost forgotten about the murder of the old lady at this stage, right? Or at least Jessica Fletcher has, because she then uses her Fletcher to question Professor Lowry.
I got the names down for a reason.
In what I think was one of the most interesting scenes in the entire episode. This kind of, we're not going to be a murder writer. We're not the police. We are the murderer. And she is then not so subtly questioning this guy. And it's not so subtle because he clearly knows he's being questioned.
Oh, yeah.
Right. About, well, why would they kill her? If a professor is having an affair with a student, he's got a wife, would the wife know? No, the wife probably wouldn't know. Okay, she's no longer a suspect. All this kind of stuff. Would the wife lie for him was a very interesting thing in developing a character we're never introduced to, which is fantastic. And I like that scene I thought that's, to me, that was something Jessica Fletcher would definitely do.
It felt like the most intriguing scene. It felt the most Jessica, but something about that scene didn't seem right. I don't think she would be. That's a big thing to do in front of a whole class of students, because literally every student knows exactly what she's doing. It's just peculiar, unprofessional. Jessica isn't, always just going to stick to the dot her I's and cross her T's. But there's a limit, to me, to how much she's willing to break social norms. That feels just like it's way too far past norm for her to want to do.
I tend to agree, but I also think that she's exactly the kind of person who wants to get the answers as soon as she can. So she sees the person who's got the answers, she's got the opportunity, she's going to use it. She believes that she's hidden it enough that the only person who really understands this is an actual questioning. Because I have no idea how many people in that room would have known Lila was dead at that stage.
But they would have known it was directed, that it was targeted, that it was deliberate.
You would have thought so. You would have thought most people would have picked up on that. But I think within the scene itself, they're not meant to have picked up on it.
Then they're stupid.
But it was a very interesting scene, and I very much enjoyed it.
I guess if it hadn't been in the room like that with all the students, had it not been, I don't know. To me, maybe if it was a small classroom rather than a whole auditorium, it would feel more natural. For her questioning them like that made sense to me. For some reason, the rest of the scene doesn't make sense to me, and I don't know why.
Fair enough. But yeah, I like that scene. I like the play between Jessica Fletcher and the professor.
Lowry.
So are we then back at her hotel?
Uh-huh.
And she gets the message written down by David. David's not there, but I'm assuming he's been in her hotel room this time with permission.
Hopefully.
Because she doesn't seem upset by the fact that he's left a message and is gone.
Weirdo fucker.
That Lowry wants to see you late at night in the university. Right?
Yeah.
Again, stupidly suspicious. She goes off. Right? She goes off. She's creeping up the stairs late at night at the university. There's weird noises. She gets out some mace.
Yes. Mace is also the brand name. Yes. It's actually pepper spray. So I'm wondering if Murder, She Wrote got paid for this product placement.
Wouldn't surprise me. Nice little bit of product placement for Mace. And then in what can only be called some fantastic stunt doubling, she gets pushed down the stairs.
I didn't even notice the stunt doubling. For me, it was so she grills Professor Lowry in front of God and everybody, gets a call to come meet him at night. Yeah. Either this is a setup for someone other than Professor Lowry or Jessica Fletcher's the stupidest human alive. Yeah. And then her rolling on the ground after she's been pushed.
Yep.
What the fuck? Oh, and then we're further again supposed to suspect David because he's the one right there.
Because he's the one finally has enough right there who finds her, which to me, again, automatically means David is definitely not the guilty party.
Exactly.
Right.
We are supposed to at least suspect him of being there right there.
Unless you're, again, trying to put cleverness into Murder, She Wrote, which is actually a manipulator like David would absolutely push you down the stairs and then pretend to save you. Right? Yeah. So there is that kind of element to it, but that's not what I took from this.
Well, and why is David even there in the first place?
Why is David even there? It doesn't make any sense.
They don't describe, or
he does explain it. He does explain it.
He does?
He does explain it. I can't remember when. It may be in the hospital afterwards, but he does explain that he took the message because this is when he says the kind of final clue, which is what makes it all work out for Jessica Fletcher. Because I think by now the murder of the old lady has now been solved.
Right. And it was solved so off screen that
so off screen, and that actually nothing about that has borne any relevance to this episode whatsoever. Right? So the only mystery we've been trying to solve this entire time was a murder that's happened about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And we're about 30 minutes into the episode. Right? That pissed me off. That's when I wasn't with this episode already, but that is when I kind of wrote this episode is shit.
I can deal with the bait and switch of hey, you thought you were supposed to be solving this murder. It's actually this one instead. The way they did it, though, was so dismissive of the whole everything that the audience is trying to figure out about this first murder, that we are very, they spend a long time with that first murder and the whole scene of it.
Yes.
And then we just solve the whole thing off screen with a 10-second conversation.
And this is when we get to, basically, it's going from clue to clue to clue until the answer is revealed. Right? And it's just stumble.
Right.
So
David mentions a person.
She's in the hospital. I think the person might be at the end. Right? I can't remember. I can't remember the exact time frame of this, but she's in the hospital. She's fine. She's a little bit groggy. Whatever. I can't remember, because at some point David is in her hotel room again. But there's also the scene where she's having lunch with the dean. This is over the hospital bed. So it's over the hospital bed. I think David, at some point, David has told them that Lila was going to give him an alibi. Right?
Yep.
She was murdered, so now he has no alibi and can't possibly have an alibi. The dean is taking that to mean that David must have murdered her because she couldn't have been his alibi because, dun dun dun, she was with me.
And again, why is with Lila with so many powerful men with such a possessive husband?
Stupid reveal. Absolutely ridiculous. Right.
We also have the scene somewhere around here where Jessica, after she gets out of the hospital, talks to Professor Lauer, and that whole plot point.
That's after. So I think that's directly after. So I think over the hospital bed is when it's kind of like, she can't have been your alibi because she was with me. Dun dun dun.
Right.
And then I think it cuts to they're out to dinner or lunch, and he is explaining himself, which I think you would to a friend. Clearly he feels guilty about being involved with it. I don't know whether it's because it's a younger girl or because it's a student or because it hasn't really worked out, but clearly he's embarrassed by the whole situation, right? He would have rather kept it to himself. Fair enough.
Dean Edmund.
There was no reason for him to have talked about it to Jessica Fletcher before this, because with the murder of the old lady, it bore no relevance, right? But now, obviously, we're still trying to make David seem like the person who was guilty. Okay, he wasn't guilty of murder A, but he was definitely guilty of murder B for trying to get himself an alibi out of murder A, which he knew he wouldn't have done, so why would he in anyway? Doesn't matter. There's no logic.
And we've already got David's full alibi for murder B because the police are already fucking watching. Because the police are saying
he's there, but obviously the police were wrong. Maybe he manipulated the police. But so yeah, we then get to that bit at the lunch, where he is explaining what happened and how they used to go to the hotel. And this is where they talk about the fact that they were almost run off the road by a dark car.
Mm-hmm. And that no one could have known that he was out there with her.
Nobody could have known that she was there. So we're starting to put the pieces together, right? Mm-hmm. Because all of a sudden there is a reasonable reason for not reasonable, but there is a logic of facts as to why somebody would have murdered Lila, right? And it's
correct.
But you can only work it out. Well, I mean, one, Lila has to be killed, so you can only work out Lila's murder after she's been killed,
right?
And two, you can only work it out as they're going through the clues, really, right? So
these are clues that are never given to us beforehand.
So the only kind of aha moment you can have, and it's if you've remembered it, is the dean says nobody knows we could have been at this weird motel. Hang on, right at the start, your secretary said she goes through and pays all of your expenses, right? Mm-hmm. She definitely could have known. I doubt anybody remembered that conversation with the secretary.
Well, and the only thing they're going to remember of that conversation is the fact that obviously the secretary's in love with him, and he accuses her of being like his wife, and is just a dick.
Because if the murder had been Lila from the start, you definitely would have put her as the suspect number one, right? The obsessive secretary. and you would have remembered that little nugget of information that she basically pays his receipts, right?
That she knows all his comings and goings.
Knows all his comings and goings, right? We have no idea what car she drives.
Nope.
Which would have been another nice little subtle hint, which could have driven us towards somebody. But again, this only happens as Jessica Fletcher is doing these weird little jumps in the last 5 minutes to get to the end. So then I believe she goes to visit Lowry in his class.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a little bit of, I'm sorry, and he's sorry, and all this kind of thing. And then she goes, I think somebody hit your car out in the parking lot, the blue sedan, because she obviously thinks Lowry is still a suspect at this stage.
Yeah.
And he says, I didn't drive today. The wife drove me in, so it wasn't my car. What are you talking about? Okay, so he's
I drive a yellow station wagon. Yeah,
he's
but also,
now off the lists.
Why did they even bother to have him have a whole reconciliation with his wife and that conversation? It's not relevant.
No, I think it's probably more to do with 80s morality. The fact that he probably should
That's nice.
He's actually a nice man.
Yeah, but we don't fix Edmund from being a piece of shit in the end either, so.
No, but Edmund, I think, was just a piece of shit. But... Well, no, he worked it out on his own that he shouldn't have been sleeping with the young woman. So he'd redeemed himself?
No.
Right?
No, that does not even count. Because he only redeems himself kind of towards the end by the time she's fucking died.
Well, no, I believe he's already stopped seeing her before she's dead, right?
Yeah, but how far? We're only a few days away from the murder of the first one to the murder of Layla. It's only like the murder of the old lady. He says, Edmund says he was with Lila that night. So we only have a day or two, maybe 3, that he's turned his life. He's a good guy now.
He's a good guy now, just because Jessica Fletcher's back in town. So I then think this might be when you go back to the hotel. And David is waiting inside the room again, says, oh, sorry, I forgot. And this is where it comes down from, I didn't say a man, I said someone. And therefore, in Jessica Fletcher's mind, someone means, must have been a woman. Because he wouldn't have just said it was a woman.
So the thing that I think that scene's supposed to go through is... When David says that, he doesn't say Professor Lowry called me. He says a person. He doesn't say he says a person.
Yes,
and that's to allude to the fact that the person who called was so... He couldn't even make out the person's voice and who they were. Because I think he's probably interacted enough with, he might recognize Professor Lowry's voice.
And obviously we get that she, the murderer in the end, who is the secretary, admits, I think, that she was trying to put on a man's voice.
Right.
Because obviously she's trying to get Fletcher there, and it's meant to be Lowry from the get-go. And then we get to what I think is the worst bit of the entire episode, which is, again, Jessica Fletcher just badgering someone into confessing to a crime that they really don't need to confess to at that stage.
I have that in my notes as well. We're doing this again.
And then the insanely long soliloquy that the murderer gives as to why she did it. It's like 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's not that long, but it is an incredibly long period of time, and it's...
I don't know if she was somebody famous.
I don't
know if they had to give us like a certain amount of screen time. Like, when there's a certain bit in a film where they're trying to go for the Oscars, right? Like, suddenly the whole tone of the film changes and they do like a great speech. And it's like, well, this is the Oscar speech. This is the clip they're going to show you at the Oscars. This is why it should win. This whole bit at the end just felt so out of place. It's like, this is us going for an Emmy. And he is fantastic. Fantastic acting. It reminded me of Lady Penelope from Thunderbirds. It reminded me of Team America with all Top Gun acting, right? It just seemed so out of place and oddly delivered that I didn't get it.
I felt like I recognized this woman, Amelia. And my takeaway from it wasn't even just that scene. It was that every scene she's in, it feels like the director said, cut, cut, cut. Give me more Lewis Nettleton. More, because every scene she's in, it's far too over-exaggerated. You can tell exactly what she's thinking because she's broadcasting it to literally everyone, to even aliens in space. We know that she's not happy with this, or that, no, she's way too...
And yeah, it just... So, yeah, again, I was very much annoyed in this episode was that, okay, the red herring in this episode was the entire murder at the beginning, right? That annoyed me. And then when we do finally get a murder that makes sense, even before, and I'm convinced of this, I don't want to watch it again, so I'm not going to prove it, but even before the police tell Jessica Fletcher that these two murders aren't related, Jessica Fletcher is treating the two as unrelated, which doesn't make any sense, right? She's right, but it doesn't make any sense. It's like people who invested in Bitcoin. You were right, but it didn't make any sense, right? And the whole thing just annoyed me. And then having to watch it more than once, when I knew that what was going to unfold every time, was just like, it was agony to me.
Even watching it more than once, I still can't remember exactly where we get rid of the first murder because it was that much of a throwaway.
Oh, it's just such a throwaway. I think it might be when... Is it in the hospital room again? Is the policeman there when they're at the hospital?
I don't think so, but fuck if I know.
I don't think... It might be. Maybe she does already know. It might be at that warehouse scene. But then I don't understand why he would ask for, where's David been?
Right.
This entire time. Like if it was at that scene. But I can't remember another scene that the detective is in after that.
Correct.
I don't remember those. So, but he must have been in one because it's all kind of
such a throwaway fucking...
And there are a lot of things we haven't mentioned. So which again don't really make sense. Because, and I think this is in the final thing where the secretary is admitting that she did it, is that she wants everybody to believe David is the killer. Of who? The old lady?
Right.
Right? And therefore must have killed Lila as well? For some reason. But because Jessica Fletcher's not convinced he is a murderer, she then decides to push Jessica Fletcher down the stairs? For some reason? Right? It seems so much a point by point by point, right? It's like, these are the clues. Rather than giving us clues and then eventually working something out at the end, it was very much a procedural kind of, okay, this is suspect A sent us to suspect B sent us to suspect C. We've alibied out A and C, so therefore we have to go back to B, right? And that's kind of what it felt like, but without the going backwards and forwards. It was just a boop, 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 she did it. Right? And how do I prove she did it? Because you've got access to his receipts, which she does push back on. But then I think it's the you drive a blue... No, it's the blue car she pushes back on. So is it the receipts that makes her confess?
So, Jessica Fletcher actually intentionally sets Amelia up by saying that that Dean Edmond is actually under arrest for the murder, I assume, of Layla, mentioning the dark black car was there. And that's when Amelia the secretary gets way over flustered. I have a dark black sedan.
A flustered emotional, yes. But I do believe she would have allowed the Dean to go down for the crime until a certain point where she confesses for some reason. And I can't remember what the final blow was.
I was not left with the impression she would let him go down for it. She's that over obsessive.
But no, I think she would, because she could have just confessed straight away. But she doesn't. Jessica Fletcher has to push her to confess. Yeah, so I think she would have let him go down for it until at a certain point, and I'm convinced it's the receipts, but it may not.
I'm disputing you on that one.
And then suddenly she confesses. None of it makes sense. And then I think we go straight to the final scene at the airport.
Yep.
After this. And this is where they've definitely trying to set David up again as guilty. Right?
I have the going home scene with David is again super creepy, especially with the closing shot of his rejected face. This is absolutely a setup for him to be a future murderer that will never actually be acknowledged again.
Yes. Like, you're left with the feeling that he is a serial killer.
Yeah.
Or at least I was, right? Left with this feeling that, no, they have almost created a murderer, maybe? Mm-hmm. Or maybe he did murder the old lady and just got away with it.
At the bare minimum, he's dangerous.
Yes.
Even if he hasn't murdered before, he will murder now, and it will be in regards to Jessica
Fletcher. Would I like to see this character again? Would I like to see him go after Jessica Fletcher? And I'm kind of like, yeah.
At least it'd be interesting.
Right? I would. It would be interesting, but we all know we'll probably never see him again.
Oh, God, no. I was looking at the wiki. Yeah, he never shows up again. We do have some of the other actors show up again later in the show, but he's never back in again.
That makes sense.
How could you have that? And also, he has the stuffed animal that he ventriloquists with.
Yes.
He's supposed to be charming, but that just feels weird.
It's weird and creepy. Yes. And in an episode that, makes no sense. I think really does not treat the audience with any kind of respect.
No.
I think it's TV, so of course it wastes your time, but I think this one really wastes your time. And I was so worried until you said that this was the first one recorded, and then maybe they decided to change tack a little bit. That this was going to be how it was going to be going forward.
So from the Murder, She Wrote wiki, this is the only episode to be produced by Douglas Benton. Robert F. O'Neill was the producer for every other episode until the 5th season, when he became a supervising position, which is a title he also had for this. So he wasn't the producer, he was a supervising producer, and
But, yes.
This is still not as bad as the bad episode, but it's bad. I don't fully remember why we hated the other episode so much, and I really don't want to go back and watch it.
Again, it's because of the bad episode. The main reason I didn't like it is because Jessica Fletcher didn't act like Jessica Fletcher.
Right.
And
she was at least a little bit in that.
There's shades of that in this one, especially with how quickly she changes her mind.
And the interrogation of Lowry,
which I don't get. Yeah, like there are bits that just seem odd, and then the story doesn't flow.
No,
you're introduced to so many characters purely to try and put you off target, but you don't know what the target is when they're trying to put you off target, right? Because they throw most of that chaff at you while you're still thinking it's the old woman who has been murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And you're still trying,
the one to care about.
And you're still trying to tie the two together. I think you're trying to tie the two together at least for a little bit.
Yes.
I honestly don't know because I can't remember where that scene with the detective is where he says, "Oh yeah, he didn't do it. David didn't do that one."
It had to have been after because they still had David under watch.
Yes, but yeah, the whole thing. I liked. Not in the right way, but I liked David. I thought he was creepy.
Mm-hmm.
His entire presence on camera was creepy. And he came across as a great manipulator. And you know, you're kind of thinking, oh my God, has Jessica Fletcher fallen for this idiot's manipulations, right?
Right. The scene I liked with him was the proving of his abilities. It was right after he barged in, so I was very annoyed with him. But at the bare minimum, he does show that he's incredibly competent at the skill he's trying to offer, which is being a secretary. And I can respect someone being like, you know what, I know I'm already in the short for this because I'm a guy and you're an older woman. I know for a fact that this is not what you would want, so let me just prove my worth. Now, at the end of it, when he does switch out the younger or older woman for a younger man, that's kind of annoying, but it's also obviously meant to charm.
Yeah, it's meant to be charming.
Let me prove myself is something I can respect, but pretty much everything else, go fuck yourself, David.
Yes. And then, yeah, like you said, with the fact that, he is shown to be a psychopath. When Lila is murdered, he shows no emotion or guilt or anything over it whatsoever.
And he's the one who set her up.
He is the one who set her up. Okay, not to be murdered.
Nonetheless.
But, it's that sequence of events that led to her being murdered, and he feels nothing about that.
Even though it was a lie in the first place.
Yes. A lie in the first place for an alibi for a murder he knew he didn't do.
Exactly.
Which, again, makes very little sense to me. I don't know why an innocent person would go to those lengths.
The way it's described is because he wants Jessica to trust him, but
Jessica already does at that stage.
This points back to him being obsessive, manipulative, and overly, and points to the final shot of, and it literally closes. The episode closes on his face.
It does,
looking very pissed off that Jessica doesn't.
It does
reciprocate.
Yeah, but yes, I did not like this episode, and I'm glad I don't have to watch it again.
I'm trying to figure out if there's some way I can make you watch it again.
No, even if turns out I hadn't hit record on this episode, we are not doing it again. Right? We would just start again at episode 7 and I was go, fuck it. All right, we're not doing 6. Right? Because no. This episode, I'm glad I can forever forget this episode now.
If they ever used David again,
yes,
and there was 80, because I would assume if they were to use David again, it would actually be over the course of 3 or 4 episodes to try and make a whole arc involving him being the creep. Then I could see coming back to this episode just to try and get a bit more of those two. But
if I was to use David again, right, it would be right at the end of the run, right, and I would have somebody. Again, you couldn't have done this in the 80s because this is not how TV episodes worked. But I would have had somebody starting to kill a la Jessica Fletcher's books.
Yep.
Right? And
trying
then
to charm her by being the...
Exactly. And then eventually you introduce David back in because he was obsessed with her. This is exactly the kind of thing he would do.
You wouldn't even have to wait till the end of the show's run. With this being season 1, you could give that till season 5 and still have it be a multi-part.
Oh, yeah. But you'd want it to be quite late on. I mean, okay, as it is, 6 episodes in, I think she's written 2,000 books and has had 8 movies. But,
in
reality, you would think that in the first season, she probably had only ever had 1 book done. That was just on the start of her rise. So you'd want to wait until she's had enough stories out and become famous enough that David would
had her have 6 books out. Or
Just
6?
No, one of the episodes it was a number of books. A number of books on that one movie because they did the episode based on the movie being done, right? But again, we're only 6 episodes in, right? And okay, so yeah, based on what we've been told, you could already do it because there's enough fictional fodder for Murder She Wrote. Right. But I think the way you would have to do it, because as an audience, we are not reading Jessica Fletcher's books.
Right.
The way you would have to do it is you would have to start to put in, okay, Jessica Fletcher does start to use murder she's been exposed to as story fodder. Right. Because then at season 5, when we're suddenly reading about somebody's dad who got thrown off a boat, right, as another murder, we're kind of like, hang on. Haven't we done this already?
Yeah. That would work.
And I think that's how you'd have to do it is that, okay, well, actually, she put that into a book at some point, and we know that. And then we start to see these kind of, and you would question, is this the series being lazy and just doing repeats? Or is somebody really trying to do murders like Jessica Fletcher has come up with in her books? Right? And I would do it such a slow burn. I do the whole season based on it.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Such a slow burn with David popping in and out.
I wouldn't have every episode about it, but I would sprinkle in even the episodes that weren't quite about it would touch
and I would have people. I would have for every murder somebody being found guilty, even though David did it, right? Because again, he's a manipulator.
Well, and can he manipulate them into confessing? Because that would also be interesting.
Or murdering.
Oh, right? Good point. Good point.
Right? He is the manipulator. I think you could have done some great stuff with a character like David, but
he never shows up again.
They're not going to, and it's not what Murder, She Wrote is meant to be about. It's not dark. It's not, it's meant to be a very simple case of the week, which you can probably have on in the background while you're making your tea.
Which is fine. I'm okay with that, but they're the ones who set up David in that closing shot.
They're the ones who set up David, yes. And that's where, to me, that one note that it could have possibly been a second pilot is interesting, is because at one point, were they going to go down a completely different road?
Good question.
With Murder, She Wrote? Were they going to do a darker... Were they going to try and do a series purely based on David where he was a murderer? As a kind of spin-off? Like, because that would be, especially in the 80s, that would have been remarkable.
I wrote the note about his story going literally nowhere before I checked the wiki, because I knew that they weren't going to do anything with it, because they've done this before already.
Yes.
Quite a bit.
Yes. But no, I'm glad I don't have to watch this episode again. I'm glad it's done. I also hope in the next episode that we're back to Cabot Cove.
Something.
I really do. Like, because... Again, I know we're only 6 episodes in. It does kind of feel like we've done more.
It feels... They're trying so hard to keep her out of Cabot Cove, and it doesn't make sense not... Like, obviously, suspension of disbelief for the audience, but we're also being thrust in with brand new casts of characters every time.
Yes.
Always some new male suitor for Jessica that she's not that interested in, that obviously the male suitor would do anything to get into her pants.
Yes.
As well as a young one this time, but the old ones are just kind of annoying. That obviously she has some history with. So the number of old suitors that she has had a personal relationship with before the show hurts my suspension of disbelief even more than just sticking in fucking Cabot Cove.
Yes, it does. And I think it would be nice. And then I also think it would be very nice. So as much as I hate procedurals, the reason they do well is because you know what you're going to get every week.
Right.
Right.
It can be comforting.
And the only difference is the people involved and possibly a little bit of character development along the way. Right. It's very comforting. At the moment, Murder, She Wrote, I mean, we've had that one episode that almost broke you because of the horses. Right?
And dogs.
And dogs. This episode has almost broken me because of how disingenuous to the audience it seemed.
Mm-hmm.
We've had one even worse episode, which we've both apparently purged from our minds.
Uh-huh.
And it would be nice if we hit a little bit of consistency.
Well, and we had the Cabot Cove one, which we both enjoyed it being Cabot Cove.
Cabot Cove
had no justification for why the gentleman interacted with her beforehand.
Yeah, none whatsoever. None whatsoever.
A profoundly large plot hole. And then the pilot, and then one other episode.
Yes. But it would be... Here. No. And I don't think the series is doing good here. But we know it goes on for, 8 seasons? Whatever it is. At some point, it has to find its charm, right?
I swear to God, it better.
It has to find some kind of... And whether that charm is, I know exactly what's going to happen, because it's the same every week, right?
It's 12 seasons.
12 seasons. And 4 movies?
Uh-huh.
Even Jessica Fletcher herself doesn't seem consistent.
Yeah.
And I know people have good days and people have bad days, but we have seen wildly different Jessica Fletchers in these 6 episodes. And it would be nice for her at least to be consistent. Or if she's off her game, there's an obvious reason why. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, she's got the flu. Okay,
she got pushed down the stairs.
You know, she's not going to be on top of her game this week because she's got the flu. Okay,
actually,
fair enough.
The time she's most on top of her game in this episode is after she's been shoved down the stairs.
Is after she's been shoved down the stairs. And maybe what they're trying to explain is that it was some kind of brain injury that made Jessica Fletcher the sleuth that she is.
But we've already established her as the author that everyone loves, that's very intelligent. She already did the whole scene of speaking Chinese because this makes her very cultured.
Makes her very cultured. And she knew Japanese as well because he spoke the wrong language.
He just said sayonara.
Yeah, but she knew that was Japanese.
Exactly. I didn't know that was Japanese.
Yeah, a lot of people wouldn't have known that was Japanese, but she did. One assumes she translates all of her own books.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, only after she got hit in the head by falling down the stairs.
Only after she got hit in the head, yes. But, yes.
That's when she picked up Duolingo.
She probably invented Duolingo. She had a mobile phone even back then. That's why she's so good at this. She's just looking everything up on Google. Everyone else is like, what the fuck is a Google? Do you mean goggles? But yes. I'm glad we finally got this episode done and out of the way. And I hope.
Gotta find new ways to torture you.
I hope next week's episode is good.
God, I hope.
Because yes,
it's
I think we're both getting to the stage where it's like, yeah, this seems like a really good idea doing 12 seasons of this show. And then we're 6 episodes in and we're like, how many episodes is season 1? Because I'm about done.
The concept of Jessica Fletcher I like, especially kind of the one we're actually given with the pilot. I like who they portray Jessica Fletcher as in that episode.
Yeah.
What the fuck is the rest of this?
Yeah, but I prefer the ones where they give us I'm really hoping they settle in at more the kind of Agatha Christie type, Poirot type thing, where it's I give you all the stories and all the possible outcomes so you can work it out yourself, and then at the end I explain it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but every single story that I've told could have been possible, right? But there are reasons why it isn't, and if you followed the timelines properly in your mind, you've worked out the answer yourself, right? Maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but to me, when you're doing a mystery series, to me, trying to work out the mystery is part of the fun, right? If this is going to become a procedural where I just turn my mind off, I want to know that. Right, because then I'm just along for the ride. Right, because there's nothing to work out because I probably won't know the answer until you explain to me the answer right at the end. And honestly, I don't mind that if I know that's what I'm getting into. But if you're trying to, so, you know, the pilot was trying to give you a mystery you could work out. Right, but then there was that whole thing about, oh, hang on, he's an escaped prisoner? What?
Yeah.
What? What are you talking about? Which didn't make any sense. And then I feel like the one on the boat, which is probably my preferred episode so far, again, there was a mystery to try and work out. And okay, when you start to pick it apart, the mystery doesn't make sense. But the answers were kind of there. And they were, you know, there was more than one possible solution that kind of made sense. The same with the one with the weird burlesque bar. Where the guy was a drag queen. You know, there were possible outcomes. Whereas this one, you could only know the outcome pretty much as it's explained to you in real time in the series, in the episode.
I'm okay with Jessica Fletcher being smarter than me and doing things like
she's meant to be.
The shoe, it wasn't half buried, it was half uncovered.
Yes. The fact you noticed the cushions in that one episode. Okay, it would have been better that you showed us the cushion so we could have noticed it ourselves. But the fact that she noticed it, that's why she solved it, because she's ahead of everybody else in the episode, right?
Right.
But the key for that is that we
have to give enough to the audience to follow.
Yes, is that the audience can also be ahead of everybody, right? And work it out. Because again, to me, that's the whole point. But we'll see. We will see. I really, really, really hope episode 7 is one that we like.
How many more do we have left in just the season?
I think it's 24 in season 1. 24 episodes.
22.
Okay, 22.
16 more. God.
Not as bad as I thought. Yes. And this is the thing. It is seeming like a goddamn right now. Rather than, oh, joy. There's 16 more episodes of Murder, She Wrote in season 1.
So what I'm hoping, or what I anticipate based on social norms and how series go, it was just well accepted enough in season 1, but they got enough good criticism to adjust and have a better season 2.
Well, American TV is normally slightly different. So with British TV, it normally takes about 2 to 3 seasons for a show to really get into its groove. Right? But that's because there's only 6 episodes. Right? And you show those 6 episodes once they're done. And any audience feedback is done, whereas I'm assuming with Murder, She Wrote that they were starting to get the feedback while they were still making season 1 of Murder, She Wrote.
This was the 6th episode that was the first filmed. I have a feeling most of season 1 was written, maybe not filmed, but written before.
Maybe, but I'm hoping, and again, hoping that it was a team, and I'm hoping they're starting to get a groove, and I'm hoping they will start to settle into something as we get to the end of season 1, and then season 2 and season 3. I'm hoping we kind of, there's a caliber of episode we expect. Right. And at the moment, there's no caliber of episode I expect. Right. Because all over the shop.
Even I'm not expecting gets better. I'm not expecting it to be good. 18.
Yes, I kind of agree with that. I don't know, like, if they do 12 episodes, break 12 episodes.
That's a good question.
If they would have done that at this stage, I honestly don't know how this all worked back then. But, yeah. And then the other thing, which I know they probably won't do, I really think they miss having a supporting cast.
Exactly. I want to see some characters more often.
Yeah. I really think having people around her, I think, would make it easier. But I don't think they ever do that, because I do believe it is always just Murder, She Wrote.
There is at least episode 12 was released on January 13th, and 13 was released on February 3rd. That's not the only break they have, but that is the only nearly 3-week break that I see. Okay. So maybe.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I don't know if they would have recorded all 24 and then shown it. I don't know how it was working. But then hopefully, if that's the case, when they're doing season 2, it may mean that there's no real feedback into the recording of season 2 until halfway through, but feedback should be getting there, and hopefully they find. I mean, they got a season 2, so I wouldn't give them a season 2 based on what I've watched so far.
Nope.
But they obviously get a season 2, so hopefully something improves. What I will say is that knowing that this came from the people who did Columbo, it seems entirely sophomore-ish. Do I mean sophomore? Freshman-ish. It really, it doesn't feel like this is a continuation or a new series from someone who has done this before, right? This feels like people doing it for the first time.
What makes you say that this is Columbo's team?
I'm sure it's the same people who did Columbo, who did Murder, She Wrote. Okay.
Columbo came out in 1968.
Yeah, Columbo was before, yes.
Right.
And I believe Murder, She Wrote was the thing they did afterwards.
86 or something, 84.
And yeah, it doesn't feel like that so far. But yes, hopefully it settles down into something and becomes more enjoyable.
It barely feels like someone who has experience making television shows, much less mystery/murder mysteries.
Yes. I mean, this is Angela Lansbury's first TV show.
Yeah, but again, I want to reiterate, the actress for Amelia looks like she was told by the director over and over again, give me more, because
yes,
it's just too much.
But this will be before Angela Lansbury's got any kind of control or producer credit on Murder, She Wrote.
Right.
And I'm going to assume at some point they gave that to her.
They shouldn't have needed to if they had Columbo experience.
Well, no, you normally if somebody stars in something long enough, you give them producer credit.
Well, absolutely, but for
one
season
is a way of
giving
them more money. Oh no, of course not. No, they were taking a gamble on Angela Lansbury, but yes, I don't know. I did not like that episode. I did not like watching it 4 times.
Happy to help.
I liked the character of David just because of how much I hated him. And I think it's a shame they don't do anything else with him. And yes, fingers crossed, next episode will be, I just want fun.
Yeah.
I'm not even going for good. I'm going for fun. Cabot Cove. Let's get the Cabot Cove sheriff back. His name I've forgotten. Let's get the fisherman's back.
Can't remember his name either.
One of them maybe could. All.
It was Ian
or Eric or something. I don't know. But yes, a little bit of fun. We've clearly proven that if it involves animals, Knight's not going to like it. So nothing with animals.
It just needs to be good, okay?
Nothing with animals, and yeah, just fun.
Earl was the father's name in Cabot Cove.
Okay.
Tupper was the sheriff, and where the hell is the? I'm not even seeing the guy's name. Ethan. Ethan. That was the friend. Yes.
Yeah. So yes, I think that let's just keep our fingers crossed for Cabot Cove. But this has turned into a really long episode of Cabot Cove Chaps. Hopefully, the consistency of Cabot Cove Chaps has been better than the consistency of Murder, She Wrote so far. I tend to think so.
I'd say we're more consistent than Jessica Fletcher is, and her writers.
Yes, and we don't seem to be as schizophrenic in our opinions.
Yet.
Which is nice.
Yet.
But yeah, this has been a terrible episode that I had to watch 4 times.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I regret doing this yet, but it's definitely creeping in.
Oh, here's hoping most of that's based on the show and not me. Hoping.
But anyway, with that in mind, thank you for watching, everybody. Say goodbye, Nightbringer.
See you Friday.
Oh, dear. It's a goodbye for me, and we will see you in the next one. Bye for now.
Tacos.